Welcome to Future Learners, the show designed to empower students, parents, and educators. Join us as we explore the ever-evolving landscape of schooling, learning, and what it takes to succeed in today's world.
This episode is brought to you by Euka Future Learning, Australia's largest online, full-time education provider for pre-K through 12 students seeking a flexible, relevant, and meaningful education. Visit euka.edu.au today.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Future Learners. My name is Brett Campbell. I am the Chairman and CEO of Euka Future Learning, and I am joined by my beautiful host, as always, the founder and head of education, Ellen Brown. Ellen, welcome to another amazing soon-to-be episode.
Yes, thank you, Brett.
So, first of all, if you haven't checked out our last episode, make sure you check that out after this episode, of course. We interviewed one of our amazing families, mother of four, and she shared her journey of what it's been like homeschooling her four children throughout the entirety of their schooling life. So definitely go check that episode out. And if you haven't yet dropped us a 5-star review everywhere and anywhere, please go and do that. And if you have, we thank you for that greatly. So today's episode, Ellen, it's a very timely episode. I want to firstly say welcome to the thousands of new families and students who have joined us over the last few weeks, starting off into 2024, and a massive welcome back to the thousands and thousands of you who are joining us again into a brand new year. So, Alan, we've been having a lot of discussions over the last couple of weeks, and with this podcast, we want to bring as much value as we possibly can, and I think right now is a very unique time. It's the start of the year. At the end of the day, our brains don't know if it's January or December, to be fair. However, what does happen is, when there's certain timelines, there's certain different levels of expectations around it. The good old adage of everyone has a New Year's resolution, and it generally lasts 2 weeks and it disappears. But in this case, as it relates to, homeschooling and learning in general, it's back to school time, right? We have hundreds of thousands of families from around the country going back to school. Obviously we've got tens of thousands of families coming back to homeschooling or trialing homeschooling, and it can add a little bit of extra pressure and a little bit of extra noise to the entire situation. So this episode, we want to dig in and we want to talk about a few nuances and get into a little bit of the granular for some of what we would say, what are the most frequently asked questions that are occurring right now for parents embarking, especially with Euka and homeschooling in general. So I want to address one thing first and foremost, because if you're a listener of the show, you'll know one of the biggest advantages of homeschooling is the flexibility and freedom of choice that we have. And we've dedicated a full episode or a couple of episodes to that particular topic in itself. And I don't think it can be talked about enough, because it is so flexible in its nature that it can almost sometimes feel too flexible for some parents, and they need to be locked into some rigidity and some guidelines, etc. And that's what we're here to do today. So if we look at the timing of the year, term one started, and families are getting stuck into it. I know there's a number of families who, even with homeschooling, say, Queensland went back on this date, or New South Wales starts here in the schooling system, and they feel some pressure that they have to be started on the same timeline because of, maybe they feel that if they don't, their child might be getting behind, or, they're getting behind, or they might feel that they're a bad parent, or they're not doing this right, et cetera, et cetera. Let's bust that myth to start with and add some context around that. So for those families out there who are like, I need to get started right now, or I'm a little bit behind. What do you say to that? Talk to that for us.
Well, I'll have a confession to start with, Brett, and say that my own children haven't started yet. So I guess that what I'm trying to say is, it's a choice whether you want to follow the school terms or whether you say, what, lots of homeschooling families say, let's do our schooling through the school holidays, and let's take our holidays when everybody else is back at school. So there is that flexibility in when to start. That's a really big one when parents go, it's week 1 of school, I should be on week 1 of my homeschooling and I haven't started. It's totally okay not to be following exactly the same school terms. You can, and it's great, and Euka is set up that way so that you can do that. But if you find yourself, like a lot of families all of a sudden starting to homeschool at this time of year, school's already gone back, not to panic, because there's even ways, if you've started late, and we can talk about this, Brett, even ways where you can say, I've started late, but I want to finish at the same time as everyone, because I might have a child still at school, or I might have commitments during the holidays, or I want my kids to still be hanging out with their friends who will be on school holidays. How do I manage all that? So that's kind of something we can talk about.
Yeah, you hit a really good point there. I don't like going anywhere during the school holiday periods. Now, Ayla isn't at that age yet, so I'm not governed by can we do something on a timeline that the rest of the world works on. I'd much prefer to go on holidays when other families are at school, and that's actually a really, I haven't thought about that recently, but that's a really good one for families who are, they don't want to have to go to the movie parks or the theme parks at the same time as every other thousands and thousands of families lining up, and so that's one little micro advantage, which I think is great. But this comes back to, again, we've talked about this, but again, I want to sort of elaborate a little bit, because we've talked about sort of daily plans and what you can do, and all of that is very important and very necessary. And I like to akin this to, like, from a business perspective, right? In order to, what we're doing here with Euka, to build and grow and expand Euka and help millions of families around the world, is we have to have a plan in mind. I'm not sitting here every day going, hey guys, I've got a new idea, let's go and do this, right? Well, hey, I thought about this last night, although I will say, for the team who do listen to this, I can do that sometimes, but that's built in. That's built into what we call a macro plan, okay? So one thing that I would highly encourage every single family to do is, if you haven't yet, sit down and look at 2024 as a full calendar, and go and you can jump on Officeworks and you can purchase a $20 calendar, which is a full year calendar, so you can see it visually. And you're like, okay, let's plot out, where are we going to have our, let's call it holidays or weekends away, or just time where we're not actually going to be going through the curriculum, but we'll be doing other things, activities, this and that. And that's a really good starting point. And it's actually a really fun thing to do, to sit down with your children and involve them in that as well. And then what you can do is you can set goals and work towards, okay, if we can, in September, you can drop a carrot. You go, okay, in September, we might go to the theme park, or we might go to the zoo, or we might do this. And you put it in there, and then your child has something to work towards as well. And again, that sort of feeds back into other avenues on how we can get our children to be more committed, or to fulfill on their tasks that are set. So first point there, though, is that macro lens, right? Zoom out for a minute. Don't get stressed that the school term has started. Whilst that can be a good sort of indicator to follow along with, per se, or to give you context, when you actually dive into homeschooling itself and you look at the day-to-day action, the format for schooling and terms, having 4 terms and 2 weeks break in between, et cetera, that is a format that's designed for millions of children. That's basically what it is, and there's no way around it, because that's how the economy has to work, and there's so many other factors. But you could take your own sort of ideas and thoughts into your own hands and go, you actually do have the autonomy to sit down and design the year that you want. Now, I will also just preface that by saying I understand there'll be other restrictions personally that we have within our own households and opportunities and all of those things, so I get that. But the best starting point is zoom out, get a 2024 calendar, sit down. I even did this with Emily the other day. I'm like, we need to get a big 2024 calendar. She went and got one. I'm like, we need to put it, because there's all these activities that are popping up and things that we're doing and birthdays and stuff. I'm like, we need to put it all down here, because my bandwidth in my own head has reached a capacity, and I'm starting to forget things that are here, there, or got this person's wedding. I'm like, oh, I've already double booked it, right? But again, coming back to that and setting the macro plan. So I want to ask you, because you're obviously in the weeds of this, how do you go about setting out your year? Do you sit down and work out a macro plan like that? Or what are some things that you could share with families on, the starting point of how we can look to design the vision of our year ahead?
Yeah, totally. I always like to think to myself, one of the gems about homeschooling is is that the parks are empty. All the great places are empty for a lot of the year. So I know that, we've always said, let's not worry about Saturday and Sunday being the days off. We always, certainly when the kids were younger, Wednesdays was the day when we didn't do any schooling as far as curriculum or activities. We were out. That's exploring, that's going on excursions, that's meeting up with friends. So that was, the way we used to plan a normal week. But, now that my kids are getting older and into high school, a lot of their friends are in school and they want to have some time on the holidays to be hanging out with them and doing things with them. So they want to be finished during the school holidays. They've chosen themselves that they like the school term idea. But in order to make sure that they can fit in working, because they're working part-time as well, and doing year 11 and 12 and things like that, means we have to be very flexible in the way we actually complete work. So they may decide, I'm not going to do all the activity sheets. I'm going to do what I need to do here and check it off, make sure I'm understanding it and moving on. So that's one of the strategies they might use. Or they might say, you know what, we're going to have next week off. So why don't I just do some work over the weekend? Or why don't I just work in the evening because I'm good in the evening? And so it's just a matter of saying, okay, like you said, the macro, let's look at when we want to be finished the term. And then you still got to be flexible, because all of a sudden they'll be called up for an extra shift for work. So it's a matter of saying to yourself, okay, even with the learning that we've got, even that we can be flexible. How much time do we spend? Do we have to do everything? Can we summarize some things? Can we discuss instead of writing all the answers? All those kinds of things. They're not cheating, because sometimes you think, oh, it's cheating because the activity sheet's not finished or something. It's about saying, how can my child learn to their best and feel most comfortable and confident in the direction that they're going? Yeah. So that's how we're doing it at the moment.
You made a good point there as it pertains. If this is your first rodeo as a homeschooling parent, then there is going to be a lot of trial and error, and you don't. Whilst I say sit down and look at your macro plan, I definitely agree that you should sit down and look at that, but be flexible with inside the flexibility as well. And because you might find that, to Alan's point there, is your child might excel in the afternoon learning versus the morning or midday, where, again, the biggest paradigm that I'm consistently trying to introduce families to is the rigidity of the current system. Now, I understand if your partner is working, from 9 to 5 every day, and it's probably not as likely that you would do learning on a Sunday because it might be a day off for your family where that's when you go and do things. So there are restrictions there, but there's also ways on how we can shape those things as well. I definitely feel we can maybe touch on those as well. But is when you're embarking on this, is you need to give yourself that freedom to be able to trial and test different ways of operating, because that's what this whole movement is about with homeschooling. It's not just get your child at home, lock them into the 9 till 3. At 12 is you walk out with a siren, you go, lunchtime, kids, let's go. That's the beauty of this. Now, if you are a parent and you have that personality where you need strict guidelines, then feel free to create those strict guidelines. If you say, hey, start time is at 8 o'clock sharp because I'm teaching you the principle of you have somewhere to be and you need to turn up to it, right? That's cool. If you say, we're stopping at lunchtime today and then we do the park from 12 till 2 or whatever it might be, that's absolutely fine. But also pay attention to, is that a successful process that we're putting in play here? It's like anything, you need to test it, you need to measure it. If you're going to go to the gym, you don't just, if you've been given a workout and you're doing an exercise that really hurts your shoulder, you don't just keep doing that exercise because you were told to do it. So there's lots of variations. You can change it. You can make a different movement. You're like, oh, all of a sudden I enjoy it more. So that's the big part there is paying attention to what you set in place. So let's sort of narrow it down slightly. So we've got the whole year, set your macro plan. Let's come down and maybe we want to look at it through a term by term basis. Whilst, how we're set up is someone could be doing term 2 right now because they started term 1 last year, which sounds quite crazy to people, but that's the flexibility. You can do that. Your child can do 2 terms within a term if they get through it and they do the work, right? So again, we know that there's the flexibility there. So if we narrow it down to go, okay, maybe work within a term space. I know you said, look, this is when we're aiming to have the term finished. So like anything, as you set a plan out into the future, we reverse engineer what we need to do in between that plan to succeed, all the way down to what does our week look like, right? So let's narrow it back down to, okay, so we've got a term, and let's say we're gonna work in alignment with the current term that your state is finishing on for whatever reason. Let's just say that's the reality. What are the things that you need to consider with inside the term from your perspective?
Yeah, look, I would say that most people will start that way because that's what we know, especially like I always went to school, so I wasn't homeschooled. So I know how terms work, I know how days work, and so I'm comfortable with that because it's what I know. So there's nothing wrong with saying I'm going to follow the terms and I want to start the week, I want to have the weeks the same. That's a great way to start. Nothing wrong with it. I suppose when you're looking at terms, like you say, Brett, factoring in things like going on some excursions and things, looking at what topics are you going to be covering this term and saying, okay, well, we're going to be covering the life cycle of a frog in this term. So how about we go and see if we can go to a creek that might have some tadpoles or something like that, you know? So I think that's one of the exciting things. And when you are starting off in homeschooling, I couldn't possibly go for the day to look for tadpoles because I've got all these days, you know, and so you ease into that, saying to yourself, okay, like I might say to myself, one afternoon a week is going to be excursion time, and I'm going to start looking through my term and saying what topics are being covered, or what sports does my child want to play? You know, can we get together with other homeschoolers and do some sport on Fridays? You know, what else is out there? So I like to say we've got your curriculum organized. Now let's look at the extras, the fun stuff on top, the icing on the top of the cake. Join a Facebook group with other homeschoolers and say, what excursions are you going to? Do you get together for sport? Do you do PE? What about me as a parent? Have I got some skills that I can give to the homeschooling kids and say, how about on Thursdays, come to my place. I'm really into art and I'd love to share that with a group of kids. Honestly, you will be the champion of all champions because everybody's got something that they know or they're good at. And lots of parents feel like, oh, I don't know if anyone wants to know this, or I don't know if it's got value, but it's got massive value in the homeschooling space. It really makes for a very rich education when you can do that with other families.
Okay, so if I try and pick some practicality out of that is, so we have the term, so I'm going here for a parent sitting there like, okay, new to this, they're going to scan through their current term and look at the subjects. And this is going to take some time. Remember, this isn't, you don't have every answer immediately. So this is the whole planning for success part of this. So you sit down, scan through what the subjects are, the lessons that there are within that as well. And to Alan's point, one of the subjects might be on the life cycle of a frog. You're like, you know what, this will be a really cool way on how we could go to the lake, or we can go to actually find a frog and be able to forward plan that. So again, this comes back to your calendar. You're like, okay, so the next 90 days per se, or the next 75 days, this is where we're going to do the excursion. Oh, there's a lesson here about history on, the Roman Empire. Okay, well, we are going to go to this museum that has that actual story already up on the wall far better than I can explain it, or the writings or the teachings that we have there can explain it, and it's more immersive, etc. So getting intentional about delivering on the lesson. So this is not just about just plonk your child in front of a computer and print out some activity sheets and go, well, there you go, good luck, hopefully you do well. It's like being involved. And this sort of breaks the narrative of a lot of parents, and rightfully so as well. One of the big, I guess you'd say, hurdles that the majority of parents have to overcome is, oh, but I'm not a teacher. How am I going to teach my child? It's like, you don't need to be a teacher per se, from a education background. You just need to be someone who's vested in the interest of learning. And you know what? You're probably going to learn some things along the way too here. Like, you're going to get involved. Like for me personally, I was not interested in the Roman Empire or history when I was at school because I never had a connection to that. Now I love history. I love everything about history because, it's so for me now, I can't wait to get to these, starting to teach Ayla about, history and this and that. So there's an opportunity to get actively involved. And this comes back again, planning your term, plan those sort of big excursions. A couple of good things you said there as well was, find potentially other families who are homeschooling. And you know what? You might have a pen pal of a homeschooler that is in a different state. And you know what you might do? In 8 weeks, we're going to go and meet up with that family. We're going to go on a road trip. We're going to drive 3 hours each and we're going to meet somewhere and we're going to do this activity. Those are the activities. Those are the moments that I guarantee your child will remember. They're not going to remember the 7 hours sitting in front of a computer doing some tick the boxes and getting some base education. They're going to remember when we drove here and we went to the creek and we swung off into the river and I found a frog, right? Like that's what people are going to, your children are really going to remember. So awesome. So we've got the term. Let's follow the theme here. Let's bring it down into a weekly basis, right? Because then we're going to get into the daily and then I'm going to get into some what do we need to do first here. We're sort of rewinding the video here as we go. So what are the key considerations that we need to look at from a weekly perspective?
Well, obviously, and I'll save the time of day to the day discussion, but when you've already mapped out, this is when we're going to see some people, this is when we're going to do some other things. And in saying that, Brett, like you said, all of a sudden, when you release yourself to learning through your children's eyes, it's so exciting. Like you've not thought about tadpoles probably for years. Now that I've said it, I bet you haven't thought about it since you were a kid trying to put them in your lunchbox. If you were like me, because I was always into bringing home things in my lunchbox. And so
I'd normally eat everything in my lunchbox. I had a different thesis.
My poor mum used to have to open the lunchbox and go, zacata shells, But all of a sudden you have this opportunity to learn things with your kids. And also on that as well, starting to keep your eyes open and your ears open about strange little museums and art galleries and things. All of a sudden you start noticing flyers in the library or the community centre and you discover there's a mummy at Sydney Uni Museum and it's free to go in, And so homeschoolers tell each other about these things. So that's also a really good thing. And I've noticed exactly what you said on the Facebook group, the Euka Facebook group. I've seen parents say, where are you? Where are you? I'm here. And connect that way with pen pals and holidays, camping, all those kinds of things. So just because you might not have somebody next door up the street that's not homeschooling, when you jump on those Facebook groups like the Euka one, it gives you the opportunity to know other people who are also doing the same topics as you, which is fantastic. So, digressing back to the week part. So you've already crossed out the day or the times that you're going to be doing other things outside of the Euka things. And with Euka, we have maths and English for each day. Now, everybody is different. Let's say the majority of people would do that. They do an English lesson each day, math lesson each day, and one other subject. That's generally what the plan will look like for most families. But if you're not doing any Euka on Wednesdays, you might say Tuesday we're going to combine 2 English lessons and 2 math lessons. And when we combine them, let's be smart and say, well, let's not do all the activity sheets and make this a miserable experience. Let's look at those things and say, where's the most value for my child? Let's focus on that. And that's a big mind shift when you're new to homeschooling because you want to do it right. You're really passionate about giving your child the best education. And I think that the biggest learning you can get that I can give is that all of your activity sheets completed doesn't necessarily mean you've had a great lesson. If your child has understood something, you've been able to chat about something, or your child's come to you because it's a high schooler, they've done it themselves, they've come to you and you've said, so what did you learn about the Roman Empire? And they can go, I did this, this, and this. Great. Press complete. Even if your activity sheet's not complete, if they have learned that and they've spontaneously been able to share it, great lesson, good learning. So that's probably the biggest tip I've got on that. But when it comes to the week, most people will find English and maths each day and then one other subject. Some kids don't work that way. Some kids say, you know what, all I want to focus on is one thing. And we've certainly had kids who've got, some different kind of challenges perhaps. They say, I'm just gonna do science. I'm going to do science for 3 weeks till all my science for term 1 is finished. Then I'm ready. I'm going to start doing maths. And that's okay too. So your week, like you say, it's going to be about your child and about your family, what you've got in there. But having something clear for your children to follow is really good. And look, even teenagers, I have found, if you've said, and I think it's a good thing to say, 8 o'clock or 8:30, get up and get going. Because even though it might not be your best learning time, you don't want to fall into that trap of late mornings and late nights, and it all just kind of gets jumbled. So I think you do have to have some structure around your week like that.
Absolutely. I mean, the week to me is probably one of the most important. So when I set up my week now, obviously I'm not personally homeschooling, but for me to get the maximum out of my week personally is every Sunday I sit there and I go, okay, does my week look different? There's certain things that are always the same within my week, but then there's flexibility within the days. And I'm like, okay, well, there's this, or I'm traveling to Sydney next on Wednesday, Thursday, so then I'm going to have to move this and that. And for me personally, sitting down, having a week designed out on my map, and when I say map, on my calendar, and this is even a really, a good tip for families. If you don't have a weekly calendar set up for your child, I highly recommend starting to get one. So set up a free Google account, Gmail account, and they can use their calendar, and then they can start to build the autonomy. As on a Sunday, you sit together, you go, okay, let's look at what this week's going to be, versus wake up Monday morning, it's a stressful night, you didn't have a good sleep, you wake up in the morning and you're like, okay, what are you going to do? Go hurry up and do some learning or get something done. It's like, let's set the week up. Let's set ourselves up for success. That is the key here. That's what I'm really trying to impart on anyone. And it's when you know what you can, and you've got already blocked out into your weekly calendar, you can't set unrealistic expectations at the end of the week when you go, it wasn't a successful week. It's like, well, what are you deeming that of? Well, if you have your calendar, you can say, well, how did we go throughout the week? Did we tick off what we said we were going to do? Yes, we did. And that's a real big one, because sometimes, and I have the mindset where I always want to get more done, and I always, feel like I could or should or want to get more done. But I also bring myself back to reality and go, Brett, you had 9 hours worth of meetings there, so you really only had 2-3 hours of the day where you could get anything practically done. So don't beat yourself up because you just didn't have the time. It's like, well, that's true, right? But what it does do is it says, well, if I want to get more done, then I can at the end of the week, I can go, okay, well, next time I'm not going to set that many meetings, or I'm not going to set that many things in that day, because I need some inbuilt flexibility within that, right? And we're going to talk about this in another episode, because I think it deserves its own conversation. Is it's around your health and well-being as you are progressing, as not just homeschooling, but in life and in general, right? So we're definitely we're gonna talk about that in another episode. That's going to be a really good one. But back to the week is really sitting there and owning your week, right? Now, if you're someone and your personality is like you just want to be super flexible and just you're going to play it by ear every single time, every day you're going to go, well, let's see what the day brings. It's probably not the best advice that I would ever give anyone, because you might be like that, but you also want to understand, how does your child best work? Because again, some children lean more towards, I need structure, I need this, I need that. But structure obviously removes any anxiousness in most cases, because most people have the fear of the unknown. And if you don't know what you're doing tomorrow, you're like, oh my God, what does my day look like? What are my lessons? What's this? So pre-planning is very, very important, and that's everything from, and we'll talk about on a daily basis, because, your start times of a day could differ. You go, you know what, Wednesday, to your point, is we're not doing homeschooling on Wednesday. Thursday, we're doing an afternoon session. We're doing a 2 p.m. till 6 p.m. because, mum or dad's come home from work, and we've committed that as part of our weekly, for this term, every Thursday we're going to go to this area and we're going to learn about something, right? Or we're going to go to the library and we're just going to go read books and blah, blah, blah. So planning your week ahead will give you so much more clarity, and it will allow you to know what worked and didn't work, because you can, at the end of the week, go, well, that was a really bad move, us deciding to do this on that day, so let's change it next week. So again, planning for success is the key here. And just know that what you set during that week does not have to be your week every single week for the rest of the term, for the rest of the year. You have absolute autonomy here. So that's the main point. Let's get into the day. So let's, I know we've talked about this in a little bit more detail in other episodes, but again, we've got thousands of families jumping in listening to this, so this is always super valuable. Let's share some insights into how do you approach a day?
Well, Brett, I liked when you said, about being very flexible is a lovely thing. It sounds like a lovely thing, but I don't think there's anybody who's homeschooling who hasn't experienced the thing where you've thought, oh, I'm just too tired on Sunday. We'll be right. We'll be right for next week. And then Monday turns around and it's like, Monday, first lesson science. Let's make volcanoes. You're like, what? I don't have Diet Pepsi and Mentos, and then your child wants to do it, and then you spend the morning going to get that. It's such an awful feeling because you know that the experience would have been fantastic, but because you weren't organized. So I think that's probably one of the things and I know we're not supposed to be going backwards, but just for a second, when it comes to the term, get your printout of the materials that you need beyond the, Mentos or Diet Pepsi. It's all listed there for you in the parent planner. So get that, take a moment, get it all organized. You'll never be in the situation of the Monday morning volcano and you're not ready. So a day, it should be pretty straightforward. If you've been able to go through your term planner and your week planner, it's going to depend on the age of your child, because now I'm in a wonderful spot where I'm working full time. My kids are homeschooling and they know exactly what to do when they get up in the morning. They know what they need to get done in the day. But days don't always go the same. But generally speaking, even in year 11 and 12, they'll do their English first, and then they'll do 2 other subjects. So the same as in the younger years, and they'll cover the whole program doing it that way. So at the beginning of the day, you set out some timing on things. Now, this is a funny one. I said set up some timing on things. You don't know how long a child's going to enjoy an activity for. I've been in the situation where I think, okay, well, I remember this actually quite vividly. We had to make a digestive system out of recycled material. I'm thinking, oh, that'll take about 5 minutes. They got so into it. It took all afternoon. And you know what? Be flexible about it. So you didn't get your 3rd subject done. It doesn't matter. They had a ball. And they're like, wait, where does the colon go? And so we had some really great discussions about how it all works, and they learnt so much. But generally speaking, we'd stick to, let's at the beginning of the day, we don't have big roll call, let's all get together and talk about what we're going to do. But I would say, and spend, 5 minutes with each child, if they're older, and say, okay, what have you got on? What does that involve? And that gives them a chance to say, oh yeah, that's what I'm going to need. As a parent, I can make sure they've got what they need, they can go. And if they're younger, I would say what's important is to say, okay, which parts of the program does a child need me for? Because we really want them to be autonomous. We want them to be independent in their learning. But there's some things that your child might need you for. They might need you to sit with them while they're reading through their book if they're a little one, or they might need. So putting some plans together for yourself about when you're going to be needed and when you can purposefully be busy doing something else. Start getting them into the habit of being able to be a little bit independent in their learning. Never get into a situation where you need to sit right by that child and do everything that they're doing. And that can happen really slowly. It just slowly creeps in. So, it's very easy to find something that you're going to be busy and say, okay, I'm going to put a timer on. This is what you're doing. This is what I'm doing. I'll see you in 20 minutes. So, yeah.
That's a great point. And there's a couple of differences there. Obviously, for the younger years, more the primary, then you're going to have to be a lot more hands-on and involved, and you're going to have to meet frequently or even sit down and be a part of the entire process, which is absolutely fine. For the more secondary senior years students, is yes, you can absolutely, and this is something that we do even inside of Euka. Every morning I meet with my entire leadership team, right? And I go, okay, what do we got on today? What are we focusing on? Where does anyone need me? What do we need? X, Y, Z. 15 minutes, 20 minutes, the entire team. We know what we're doing. We know what we need to do in each department. And we know what success looks like by the end of the day. And then we go out and do it. That is a perfect, that's, again, when we talk about setting ourselves up for success, it's it's a very good framework to work from. So you sit down with your child at the start of the day, say, okay, so let's bring up our calendar together. Here's your calendar. Here's mummy's calendar. Or here's daddy's calendar. And so for the next couple of hours, you're going to be doing this. And then at 11 o'clock, at 9 o'clock, and then mummy's going to go and do this, or daddy's going to go and do this during that period. And then we're going to meet together at 11 and we're going to work on this together, et cetera, et cetera. So all of a sudden, it's a two-prong approach here, is whilst you're setting your child up for success, you're setting yourself up for success as well. And I'm not saying you need to live every minute by your calendar, but, I'll tell you what, for me personally I've got a fair bit of responsibility throughout the day and lots of different things that I personally need to do. And I could not handle that without a calendar. Like I literally, in my calendar, I have times where I'm going to go and play with Ayla. I have calendar time where I'm going to go and hang out with Emily. And it's literally booked in. And that way I can sit there and go, this week, do I tick the box of a good business leader? Do I tick the box of a good father? Do I tick the box of a good husband? Based off obviously my own, thinking. But I can look at that and I go, you know what? If I ticked all those boxes this week, that would be a very successful week. Versus, I didn't get time to do this. I didn't get time to do that. It's like the only reason you didn't get time to do it is because we didn't plan it, or your expectations of what you think you could get done was just far too stretched, and there's no way you would have got it done anyway. So why would you even be frustrated about it? So the daily is more about setting yourself up. Let's go ahead, and this is what we're going to go and do. It's a very good framework. And then secondarily to that, you might not walk around the house or wherever you are with a siren and go, "Where at school's? Yeah, homeschooling's finished." Although that'd be funny. I'd probably be that type of dad, to be fair. And you need to take into consideration making sure, and we'll talk about this in another episode, like I just said, is the health and the well-being, and at home you don't have like a school siren for lunch to go, oh, geez, I was so engrossed in that, it's lunchtime, right? Or, yeah, we've got playtime, or we've got whatever. Well, I don't even know if they call it playtime anymore. It was for me, because all I did was used to play during the breaks. And so you need to make sure that that's built into your day as well. But then the second most valuable part, so the first is setting up your day. Second is, let's sit down and let's look back at your day. What went well? Like, what did you enjoy today? What things didn't you enjoy today? Why didn't you enjoy it? And explore with your child and find out, because you're going to quickly, that's the evidence that you will use to keep crafting the next day, the next week, the next term, right? So if you're finding your child doesn't like, to your point a little bit earlier, if you're finding, I had a hard day today because I didn't like watching that video. Like, I'm not really liking watching videos, or I didn't like having to read this specific book. I just, reading right now, I'd much prefer to watch a video, or I'd much prefer to do an activity sheet. And that's the clues, right? That's where we're like, oh, well, you work really well off activity sheets. Like for me personally, I probably would have leant into 90% activity sheets, because that's my way of learning and how I enjoy best, and I can get more learning done. And every child, every person has their own different way of learning, right? So paying attention to those clues is very important. And I just want to double tap for you to talk to this point, because I know it can be a little bit overwhelming for some families where you're like, because we do provide flexibility, it's like, here's a book, or here's a video, or here's an activity sheet. It's like, you don't have to tick every single thing or do everything, where I don't want families to be like, but if I don't do everything, then we haven't done it properly. And we're, especially those parents who have what I would call the need to be perfectionist tendencies, and you're like, no, everything has to be done properly to the I's dotted, T's crossed. What would you talk to that for a moment, where I know there's a handful of families, or a number of families obviously bring up a point of the need to do every part of every part.
It's like what you said about setting yourself up for success. What does success look like? Every homeschooler, it doesn't matter where you are or how long you've been doing it, we're all questioning, am I doing it right? Am I doing enough? Is my child ahead? Are they behind? Are they the same? And it's trying to start to get some big picture perspective on something like that, and think to yourself, if you can talk to a high school boy and say, what did you do today? And they can rattle off a whole heap of things that they did in a day, you're so far ahead. Because I don't know if you remember, but if you go and chat with a a high school boy who's just come out of school for the day and said, what did you do today? Nothing. Like, that's the normal.
I set up a good try. I set up a good try when I was playing touch football. You should have seen it.
That would be yours. But it's quite common for them not to even remember anything they'd done in a day. So letting yourself off the hook there is a big one. But back to what you were saying about the various activities that we might put into a lesson. So, for example, we will have an activity sheet. More than likely, there'll be a hands-on activity. There'll be some information and a video. It's not in there because you have to do it all. Like, it's in there because each child is different and we really want opportunities for learning. So if your child is a hands-on person, back to the life cycle of the frog, if your person's a hands-on person and they're making the life cycle of a frog, but they don't want to fill in the activity sheet, doesn't matter. They've learned the life cycle of a frog. You can talk to them about it. They can tell you about it. Tick, you know? Or they don't want to make the life cycle of a frog. They just want to write down the information. Great. So it's about releasing yourself from that feeling like, if I do everything, I'm going to be better. My child's going to be more knowledgeable, or the lesson will be complete. It's about seeing when your child's learnt and how they learn best and making choices about that. That's important.
Amazing. So to quickly recap, we have the absolute macro of sitting down, planning out your 2024 year, okay, with key dates, key initiatives. Then we bring that down into a term and we look at what are the key things that you're doing within that term. What are you trying to achieve? How long are you hopefully expecting to have this term last? Then we bring it down into the weekly opportunities and setting up your week every single week. Then we bring it down to the daily, setting up your day, checking in on your day at the end of the day. And just one other thing that I want to add to that point where you're checking in at the end of the day is I would recommend getting like a diary or a nice big diary, and every single day you write this down, right? I know we're in the worlds of computers, but it's important to still be able to learn how to handwrite, because there's lots of connection and learning lessons through the ability of hand-eye coordination, all of those things that come from that. That's maybe another topic, but the ability for you to write down with your child and go, tell me all the things that you accomplished today. And then all of a sudden, every single day you're doing that. My goodness, at the end of a term, you're going to go, look at all the things you've learned, right? I mean, you've got a memoir of all these cool things, or, so you've got proof to be able to go back to and go, oh my goodness, like, look at all this, look at what we've been able to achieve. This is great. So we've got that from a daily perspective, and then we went down into sort of the lesson approach, and there's flexibility within the lesson. If you want to do an activity sheet, if you want to build an entire digestive system, like one of our families did recently. I seen the photo on Facebook. I was like, oh my goodness, that must have taken a week. I think it did, but that's okay. You know, there's flexibility within how you arrive at outcome. If you're not sure and you're like, yeah, I don't really have the confidence to be able to change or make that decision myself, it's like, you know what, get into, at least, the very least, jump into our community. If we've got a Facebook group of families, jump in there, and there's parents every single day sharing different things. I mean, I've even, as I sort of scroll through there, I'm in there a little bit having a look and commenting to some families, and some of the things I'm like, oh my goodness, that's such a good idea. Like and you could tell the personality of certain parents, because one thing I was like, one parent printed out everything. Now, you don't need to print out everything at all, but that's just their way of sort of doing it. I was like, oh my God, that's so neatly organized. And you don't need to be the neatly organized person. You just need to see someone who is and you go, that's a great idea. Can you tell me how you did that? I'd like to do that as well. I think that'd be very helpful. So always, and if we revert this back down, we've got the lesson. If we revert it back down into the minute, okay, I'm going to take this all the way back down to the minute and just end us on a couple of really important things to think about. First things first is, within the minute, what you need to be focused on is the ability to breathe. Make sure you're breathing through this, okay? It's okay to stop and take a deep breath, and it's okay to challenge your own mind and go, oh my God, I don't even know if I'm doing this right. That's okay. These are all thoughts and feelings that every single parent and every single human has pretty much every day in most cases, whether you're homeschooling, you're doing a new job, or you're trying to build the future of education. Like, it all happens, right? We're all human. Just know that the fact that you're even embarking on this is you're doing an amazing thing for your family, and you should stop and pat yourself on the back with that as well, okay? So with that being said, Ellen, any final thoughts to wrap us off with, please?
Yeah, I've always got a final thought. So look, I would say understand that it takes a little bit of time when you've gone through 12 years of schooling yourself and all of a sudden you're homeschooling. It's going to take a bit of time to feel like flexibility is working and I can make decisions about term dates and weeks and things like that. So that takes time. But guess what? It also takes time for a child that's been in the school system who's now homeschooling. And it takes a while for them to start to go, oh, actually, it's okay. I don't have to do everything. And I don't have to compare myself to what, my friend just told me on Instagram that they're doing or whatever. It takes a little bit of time to know we don't need to compare anymore. We're on our own journey. So give yourself a minute to think, okay, well, it does take time. But also sometimes it helps to glance back at what are they doing in school. Like, yes, they might be there all day, but they've got recess, lunch, assembly, library, practicing for the play on Thursday, all the things and disruptions that go on in a day, and compare the fact that you managed to spend 2 or 3 hours doing some solid learning, and you can say to yourself, we're doing really well here. And the other thing is, like I said before about how sometimes you can fall into the trap as a parent to think I need to sit beside them because I need to help make sure they understand the question. That's not going to happen in school. Like if they've come out of school, they may have had an experience where they needed more support, and that's great, you can be it. But also learning that it's okay, they have learnt to be able to get on with activities themselves. I know I used to have to remind myself, it's okay, they can do this or that, and it's okay for me to let them get on with things. So free yourself a little bit from expectation.
Very well said. And with that is an absolute wrap. If you have gotten value from this episode, please share this episode with any friends, family members, anyone you know that might get value as well from this. And if you haven't, please drop us a like, head over to iTunes, Spotify, drop us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate that. And if there's anywhere around this video you can drop a comment, let us know a comment. Let us know your tips, tricks, and what works for you. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you on the next one.